looks like we're ready to rock and roll. Noai and kia ora koutou, ula, and warm Pacific greetings to everyone. And thank you for joining us on what is Tuesday, the 13th of May, Rotuma Day. So, Rotuma Day means lots of different things to different people, and we'll get into that shortly. But ko ai au, who am I? My name is Ara Alam-Simmons, and I'm Bangladeshi. I'm very humbled and honoured to be asked to kind of facilitate this conversation between three wahine toa, and the significance also that we have our wahine up here is kind of been intentional and deliberate, given that oftentimes it is the women in our communities who are often the knowledge holders and the holders of cultural practice, and sharing cultural knowledge through whānau, and of course very much supported through and by the tāne and everybody else within the family structure. So welcome all. And so as we just settle into this conversation and before our panelists introduce themselves, I did a bit of a Google search, so being quite transparent to where I've gotten my information from. And so when I Google Rotuma Day, this is what Google tells me. It is a significant day for the Rotuman people as it marks the day their island was formally taken over by British rule in 1881. It is a celebration of their unique culture and traditions, but also a time of reflection on the ongoing impact of colonisation on their identity and their future. The day serves as an important opportunity for Rotumans to discuss decolonisation and the ways in which they can reclaim control over their culture, heritage, and language, and also political self-determination. And if I just did a straight Google, it wouldn't have given me all that information. You would have gotten no information about the people needing to decolonise itself. And we'll get into that word shortly too. And also the other dimension of this conversation, and I really do want to mihi to both Rach and Nick in terms of what they do for Rotuman Language, as also leaders in their own community, is that having this conversation to begin with, because it is not common practice to talk about the ways in which communities have been colonised, because it raises interesting questions. It also raises interesting questions about the role of religion as a colonising tool within our communities. And also when we say religion, it's something that many of us hold close to our hearts. We feel it's very much ingrained and part of who we are and our identity. And it can almost feel like an attack when we might consider these conversations. So also it is an opportunity to reflect as we enter into this conversation. If there's something that you hear that kind of you feel discomfort with or kind of unsettle you in some way, it is a point to kind of just reflect and just think about what is it about what has been shared that is unsettling or you don't feel so comfortable about, as opposed to kind of pushing that conversation away. So it is also an opportunity as our audience, as our community here to listen, an opportunity to also reflect on these questions as we ask these questions together. So, with that, in terms of setting the scene, I'd like to introduce, although these wonderful wahine are going to introduce themselves, Rach Mario, we've got Joanna Bourke, and Marama Nepia.
Kia ora.
So with that, and in terms of settling into our first question, it is, and I'll begin with you, Rach. Tell us a bit about who you are, and what you're about, and what about this conversation about decolonisation that interests you, that you want to be part of.
Thank you. Noi mōre everybody. Adasa Rachael Cherie Mario ngole on le tifere ma alisi pepche chuchu noto maitumuta ma ofo se lu meterant ila tiang sama my name is Rachael Mario and I'm from Chuchu Pepche Itumuta and Noto and Haroa Motusa. Sorry, missed that one out. But thank you all for coming this evening and being with us today. The question about decolonization is an interesting one because it's about our values, our identity, our languages, and trying to hold on to them and just make sure that it is upheld. As it is, our language is endangered. So we as Rotuman people would like to make sure that it's there for the future generation. So to do that, we need to have the resources, be empowered, and also just teach our little ones, speak in Rotuman at home, speak to each other. And so in my family, my daughter Zoe actually speaks Rotuman and she understands it fully. The other two just understand it. So it's more about, making sure that the kids speak it so that it doesn't die. As in terms of decolonization, that's a very interesting topic. Because as you all know that a lot of our Pacifica people and tangata whenua have been colonized. So how do we decolonize ourselves is actually a long conversation. So yeah, I'd be happy to elaborate more on that later on for Yaxia.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm going to invite Joanna.
No ia, Pula, kia ora, and malo elele. Yes, I'm Joanna Bourke. I'm currently the Chief Executive at the Pacific Cooperation Foundation. We're a New Zealand organisation. We've been around for over 15 years. And in that 15 years, we've been through a bit of a transformation. So we were originally set up to help diplomats in Wellington be better informed on what is happening in our community, but also look at what's happening in the Pacific region. But over time, a number of agencies have opened up in New Zealand, obviously, that have filled the gaps around advising government around what is happening in the diaspora, but also in the region. So since I've been with the organisation, which is going on 2 years, we've transformed to basically strengthen the identity of New Zealanders. So how do we as the diaspora, but also people who are born here in New Zealand, understand and recognise that they are part of the Pacific, so they're also Pacific Islanders if you're born and raised in New Zealand. New Zealand is not a country on its own, and I'm not just talking about tangata whenua, it's the others who have come and colonised this country and have made it their own, who forget that they are part of the Pacific. Our other role is also around deepening relationships. How do we deepen the relationships between the diaspora and the region? and how as we as agents for change can deepen that. And so some of the work we do is around influencing or working with a lot of our scholars that come from the Pacific on New Zealand funded scholarships to study here. And how do we provide a community for them to thrive and prosper when they're here studying? And we do that by giving them, exposing them or introducing them to community, but also providing them with work-based experiences so that they go home work ready at the end of their degree, because they all have to go home. And the other thing that we do is around how do we amplify voice? How do we continue and change the narrative that we see around Pacific people here in New Zealand media, right? Because we all know that the media is so focused on promoting New Zealand sport, Pacific sports stars. Those are entertainment, and that's it. So New Zealanders think that Pacific people only excel in sports and only excel in entertainment, and forget that actually we have a lot more to offer than what we're seeing in the Pacific. So my role for being here tonight around the decolonisation topic, I've never really coined it as being decolonisation. My narrative is how do we amplify the voice of Pacific people, how do we raise the bar of Pacific excellence in New Zealand and change the narrative so that our people are telling our stories and that we're getting diversity of stories out there. And for my sins, I'm Tongan, but I'm born and raised here in New Zealand. And I'm proud to say that as a Tongan born here, our island, our little kingdom has never been colonised, and I think for good reasons. But that aside, it doesn't mean that we don't battle with decolonisation, because I think everyone in the Pacific, because of the influence that we're seeing, still battle that, whether you're colonised or not colonised, right? There is that strong influence that we think is the number one, that's where we want to be. We aspire to be what the colonisers are coming and telling us. But I think my role is around how do I, as a child of the diaspora, but also a child of the Pacific, help change the narrative and help restore that pride amongst our diaspora to help those back home. So I'm sure we'll uncover that as part of our Talanoa tonight. But thank you, and
Ngā mihi ki a koutou, ko tāwai o tēnei pō. Ko wai au, ko Marama tōku ingoa, e noho au I roto I te tāne o Uru Tāmaki. I te taha tōku pāpo, ko taupiri te maunga, ko waikato te awa. Ko waikato te iwi, ko tauni te waka. Ko Ngāti Wairere, Ngāti Popake o ku hapu, ko Tuturu a Papa Kamatu, rau ko Karaka o ku marae. I te taha tōku mama, no ngā puhi tai toke rau ko tauhinari te marae. Hori kai mohi o tērā taha. Engari, he Māori ahau. Kia ora everybody, my name is Marama. I am a cultural practitioner, signed up with Grace Foundation, implementing and restorative justice for our rangatahi wahine that have been disempowered by systematically being in prison or under the Oranga Tamariki Act. I also do referrals for Auckland City Mission under Te Pare Hinatore, who is also implementing and uplifting our wahine Māori that have been homeless. So to both kaupapa Māori, one is faith-based under Seventh-day Adventists, and the other one is kaupapa Māori. But with our rangatahi from Grace Foundation, they implement a lot of kaupapa Māori, mātauranga Māori, in regards to re-establishing themselves back into the community with successful and positive outcomes. But we will talk about that later on in our hui, in our wānanga, our piti kōrero nō reira. Ngā whānau mā nau mai haere mai ki Aotearoa, e tuake, I roti I tō ao, stand in your own, mana enhance you and your whānau, and we'll be right. we'll get there. Kia ora.
Thank you for those wonderful introductions. And so, first of all, going back to this word of decolonisation, to perhaps understand decolonisation, we perhaps have to consider what colonisation is and to be colonised. So in terms of not to make any assumptions. And so in terms of Rotuman, there were chiefs that had asked the British to get involved with Rotuman and take control back in 1881 with the promise of being able to sort out two warring religious factions, the Wesleyan community and a Catholic religious group in the Rotuman Islands. Now, there were chiefs that asked for this control to happen from the British. However, that wasn't something that the Rotuman people themselves wanted. So what happens in a colonisation process, it's not just the taking control of powers of the country, it's also the settling of lands, it's also the removal of language, cultures and practices. It's also a psychological removement. So they're not only taking physical space as land that we might understand and practices, they're also taking psychological space. And so we talk about something called a colonised mind, and that just doesn't disappear. And so one of the responses to that is this idea of decolonisation, and that word means very different things to different people. And so before we just kind of get into that next question, and I know all of you have spoken to it in some sense, so I'd be interested in your expansion. When we're talking about strengthening our identity, because identity has been taken, by changing the narrative, because stories are told about us that are not the correct stories that we want sharing about us, and also the taking of language. So we know Rotuman language is an endangered language. So I'm really interested in a bit more deeply what that word decolonisation might mean to each of you.
No, Ara. As you all know, Rotuma was ceded to Britain 1881 today, 13th of May. And I'd like to call it a day of remembrance. Like having our culture, our identity. Our Rotuman people tend to celebrate it. We've been colonized twice. We were ceded to Britain and then taken over by Fiji, governed by Fiji. So I call that a double colonization. And saying that, if you look at Rotuma used to not have Fijians on the island. Now there's quite a few families there, and our Rotuman people are losing the language. For me, it's quite sad, because our Rotuman people need to be educated more on that issue. No disrespect to all our elders here, but they need to be educated in the sense that if, for example, take for example tangata whenua in Aotearoa. There were 200 people, and then now it's a flip. It's 70 to 30 to 13%. So if Rotuma doesn't watch it, we will be like the tangata whenua of Aotearoa. We will have more Fijians on the island. We will lose our identity. We will lose our language. So it's quite important that our Rotuman people understand that. And moving forward, as I know, I was told that in Fiji we used to have vernacular classes, language classes, Rotuman language classes, where all the kids in school it was compulsory to learn it in school. Now that's the last government got rid of that, so that's not part of the curriculum anymore. And so the Rotumans in Aotearoa and Fiji especially, they should advocate for it and get that reestablished. Also on the island, I mentioned the Fijians. There's quite a few families there now, and used to be just Rotuman teachers, Rotuman doctors, Rotuman. Now it's flipped. Our Rotuman teachers are not allowed to go and teach on the island anymore. They're sent to the other islands. So it's like a colonization happening in the process, but our Rotuman people don't understand that. They, if they don't watch it, we will totally lose our language. My family, for example, I have half of my family is Fijian, and also my husband's part Fijian. But I'm strong in my identity and my language. That's why I teach my children to speak it, because it's quite important that they speak it and they know who they are, so that they can be empowered. And also, it's really a sad case. Whereas in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we've had to advocate and get this language week. That's why we have this language week running. Again, we had to fight the state, and that was a big issue for us. After many emails to and fro, we finally got the language week. And again, we always have cycle funds in our community that does what the state wants. And if you look at Fiji, it's the same thing. Fiji and Rotuma, we have our chiefs, but then we also have people who are advisors to the chiefs, and that's what I call cycle funds. Is they're doing what the colonizers want them to do, and they ignore the other bits. And Rotuma is quite rich. The culture is rich in itself. We have the resources, we have the land, but we don't govern it. We always, Fiji always has a say in how our island is run. Although we have seven districts in Rotuma, our Rotuman people always have to listen to what the government of Fiji says. And again, the cycle funds are the advisors of the colonizer that gives advice to our chiefs. So it's quite sad for me looking from outside. And as a Rotuman, if we don't do something about it, it's going to be lost. And it's really an endangered language. So yes, and we don't have many speaking Rotumans in the world. In fact, like I said, half my family is part Fijian. Most of them speak Fijian fluently, and they've lost the Rotuman language. So they prefer to speak Fijian. Even if they're all Rotumans, you think it's a Fijian gathering because they're only speaking in Fijian. They could be all Rotuman men sitting around a grog bowl or just having a guitar lesson or whatever, playing music, and that's all they're doing. So to decolonize, they really need to go back and look at look to what our ancestors have had, and try and look into that and really empower themselves. And sorry, I'm quite emotional about it because
Well, you touch on some very salient points, and one of the things that strikes me is, as you're talking, decolonization also for you is about love of heritage and the language and the culture and the practice, but also advocating for self-determination of Rotuman people. And just with that, I kind of wanted to bring you in, Marama, in terms of...
bring me in.
Just talking about decolonization and perhaps from your lens, what that has meant for the iwi and hapu that you belong to.
So pre-colonisation, we were really, we had our own system. So our system was based around ariki, kaumātua, kuia, then our mum and our paia, matua, then our tamariki. But everybody looked to our chief prior to pre-colonisation. So when the tauiwi came, we lost that. They didn't see that as a strength. It was, they wanted power. They wanted to create and corrupt and conquer. And they did that. They did it. They took over, they gave us this big spill that, you know, their God is better than our God. Well, we had a God, a kaitiaki for everything that we saw, ate from, gathered from. You know, we had Tangaroa, we had Tāne Mahu, the God of the forest. We had all these people, and they weren't gods, they were kaitiaki. They were guardians of these places. But when colonisation came here, they came with their book. No disrespect to the book, okay? No disrespect to and what's in it. But they came and said there was only one God, yours isn't real. Yours is, that's, I think in the Bible it says, they shall not idolise anything before him, our God. You know, I'm not religious, but I remember hearing that a lot at the marae. And we lost, when government took power, when British took power over our country, we lost our language. I hear Rachael saying that Rotuman was spoken in classrooms. Ours wasn't. It was ripped from our beds. It was ripped from our homes. We didn't have the chance to have that opportunity until late in the 80s, 1980s. And that's not that long ago, really, if you have a look at it, that we were able to say kia ora without even getting slapped upon or getting arrested. And, you know, it's to decolonise our train of thought and our mindset. The first start is, ko ai au, who am I? Let's start here and create within our whānau, yourself, your whānau, then your hapu, then your iwi. So it's about mana enhancing, uplifting your belief. As Rotuma, believe in what you are and who you are first to create that whole system for you and your whānau. Because it's just a matter of talking and using your first language, saying hello in your language, and then the next day is hello, how are you? So you're gradually building up this decolonising ourselves and bringing back ko ai au, who am I? That's all I've got to say. I don't know why I'm just looking over here.
That's okay, you're getting right through here.
Yeah,
No problems.
yeah.
Kia ora.
Yeah, decolonisation is it starts with ourselves. Be accepting who we are, because you know there were some times in our lives, and I know it, that we were gone, oh shame. That's embarrassing. I don't want them to know who I am and where I'm from. You know, and it's only because that systematic way that they have, the colonisers have portrayed us. Yeah, that's all I can say right now.
Do you have a question? Yeah, I'm, you know, and I did allude to this, you know, that I'm a child of the diaspora, and you know, I was raised not to think like a Tongan, not to speak my language, not to know anything about my culture and who I am. So, you know, here I was, this fair-skinned, curly-haired child who would go to a white school and come back and say to mum and dad, oh, the kids are making fun of my hair. Like, what do I need to do? And my parents would be like, don't worry about that. And I said, well, I do need to worry because they all have straight hair and I want straight hair like them. And they're like, well, you're not, you know, just do what you need to do and behave. And so my parents were of that mindset that we needed to conform to the Palangi way in order to survive in New Zealand. And so I did. I played that game for a majority of my life. And it wasn't until I went to Tonga, I mean, I would go to Tonga and visit my grandparents, and I had a very privileged time when I was there because my grandparents wanted to make sure that I had the luxuries that I enjoyed in New Zealand in Tonga. But it wasn't until I got older that I realised it was hard for them to do that. They didn't have the money. They had to go and buy a bed. They had to go and buy proper pillows, make sure that I had bottled water, right? I suppose the point that I'm trying to get to is, where's that pride that we need to instill in our kids here in the diaspora, right? And I am hopeful when I look at today, you know, celebrating things like Rotuman Language Week. Here in New Zealand, our government and leaders before us have paved the way so that we're able to enjoy our language, the differences that our culture brings to New Zealand. And what we don't see in the Pacific is that we don't see that same kind of pride. We think that just because you're living in Tonga, you're living in Rotuma, you're living in Fiji and Samoa, you think that they're proud of their language and their culture. I can tell you, probably not, because of that colonisation mindset. They think the Pālangi way, the British way, the colonial way is the only way and the best way.
White is right.
White is not right
Yeah.
for our people. Because when you look at the disparities, the health outcomes, the social outcomes that we see today, you know, what is that a result of? You can't turn around and say, oh, it's the remittances that we are sending back home to enable our people. No, it's because it's indoctrinated in through our culture as a result of colonisation that have caused these disparities and the problems that we are seeing today. Decolonisation, my understanding of it, even though I've never really put it under a label, is we as the diaspora have a huge role in empowering our people back home and restoring that pride so that we can fight this colonisation that we're seeing that's infiltrating through our culture, that's leading to the cause of the loss of language, the loss of culture, but more so that loss of pride. And, you know, some of the programs that I've been working with in the past, because I've spent a lot of time in the Pacific working on programs, is around how do we restore that Pacific pride in the way in which we live. Because when we do that, it's actually a solution, and I think the only solution to how we deal with a lot of problems that we're seeing today. So to recap, decolonisation for me is how do people like me advocate for our diaspora to go back home and see what it's like back home, and how do we share our experiences so that we're able to help them be proud of who they are, no matter which country or island they're from. So it is around restoring the language, looking at the hierarchical structures that have been in our societies, that where we were able to live harmoniously with the, you know, our way. You know, we grew vegetables, we went to the sea, we lived off the land, we were able to live, you know, in peace, and we had our own gods and we did things our own way. And then they all came along and said, well, actually, no, that's not good for you. You should try this way. You know, all our Pacific, when they arrived on the islands and all our women were beautiful and didn't have clothes on, they were like, oh no, you can't do that. You now have to cover up. Women can't have tattoos. You can't be baring your breasts. That's just shameful. But how do we restore, how do we bring that pride back in? So that's the decolonisation story for me. Yeah, it's about strengthening that identity so we reclaim what is inherent in us. And you know, when you look at it, we're born with that Pacific pride, and what does that mean? And you know, people like me fight internally every day with, am I Tongan, am I Kiwi, am I Irish, because I'm mixed blood, so who am I? And it's not until I got to the age of, you know, over 50 that I realised actually this is who I am, because I've been on this journey. And so I advocate for more people, for more of the diaspora to take on this journey. And I think it's about starting at, you know, school age and having these different events where we get to celebrate our language. It's not just the language, we celebrate everything about who we are at a young age. And you as parents have a huge role to play in that.
And so what is coming through really strong is like starting with yourself from where we stand, and also within our whānau, and also just talking about all the connections immediately between three sisters across the Pacific diaspora. And I'm just reflecting on my own positioning. I'm part of the South Asian diaspora through the UK. And the thing is, we cannot even have these conversations about decolonizations because we are shut down and shut out, because we are the diaspora who are the model minority. We are the people that others should aspire to. So it's very difficult to even have these conversations in our community, because our communities, South Asian particularly, are very white facing. we look to the colonizer. And so just bringing in this other question now, again, you've all touched on it in your own way already, is that we're gonna kind of venture into the religious spiritual aspect now. And so in what ways has the imposition of Christianity had a big role, and colonial and religious practices affected, and I've put here Rotuman spirituality, but please speak from your own places. Who would like to kick us off?
Okay. Christianity, that's an interesting one. As you know, that Rotuma, the Christians, the Methodists, and the Catholics, the missionaries came to Rotuma, so they were our first colonizers. Having said that, I'm brought up Catholic, staunch Catholic by my parents, and growing up, you just you're Catholic, but once you go through school and you understand the whole concept of it, we've had our forefathers, our ancestors, have had their own religions, and that's what the colonizers did. So we Rotumans, however, we still do sarau and medicines and things like that, but if you venture into that field, it's considered witchcraft, and it's taboo. So it's kind of sad because our forefathers and our ancestors, we had our, like she said, katiaki. We had our own gods and things like that. But since the missionaries came, you can't do those things because you'll go to hell. So that's how our people, and also in Rotuma, they were divided into Catholics and so the colonizers always divide and rule. So that's what happened. And because they couldn't agree, Rotuma had to be ceded to Britain, and then of course colonized by Fiji. So like I said earlier, Rotuma has been colonized twice. And for our people, it's quite important that we know our identity, our values, and who we are, and be strong in it. And language is also foremost important, because if we don't know our language, our kids don't learn our language, we are no one. So we need to be strong in who we are, know who we are, and be empowered. So it's quite important that all our people sitting here, that you talk to your kids in Rotuman at home. Although we teach it here, thanks to Tupo and Auntie Cherie who run our Rotuman language classes, it's once a week, and it's not enough. It needs to be taught at home. You need to speak it at home. And so for Rotuman Language Week, I'm only speaking it in Rotuman at home. So if the kids don't understand it, they say, "Oh, what do you mean, Mom?" So, but I'm trying to make it a continuous, like I said earlier, Zoe, my middle daughter, she speaks it and she understands it. The other two are getting there. But it's quite important that they know their identity, who they are, so they can excel in anything they do. They don't have to worry about the world. So, yeah. In terms of decolonizing, again, it comes back to identity, values, and personal growth, and looking backwards, looking to what your forefathers and your ancestors have done, and moving forward and shaping your future how you want it. Do not let the colonizers, whether it be the Fijians or the Europeans, tell you what to do. It's you have to be strong in your values. You have to be strong in whatever you do, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. If you don't agree with something, advocate for it, or seek advice, or be knowledgeable about it. And coming back to Rotuman Language Week, we are so happy to be able to celebrate Rotuman Language Week. And so we got a whole week of activities right throughout the week. But again, we were not that lucky like the other Pacific communities. We've had to advocate for it, because we are colonized by the Fijians. Every time we wrote to MPP, which is the Ministry of Pacific Peoples, we were told, "Oh no, you're a Fijian. You don't need your own Rotuman Language Week." And then we have to say, no, our culture and our identity and our values and our language is very different. And I'm sorry, but we are governed by Fiji, but we are not Fijian. So that was toing and froing for 2 years until I made a human rights complaint. So immediately, overnight, we got that. And having that, which was great, but then we used to be united. And again, the colonists have worked in their own way to divide us. So at the moment, we are divided. You know, they always play each other. And like I said earlier, there's always sycophants in the community that does what the colonizer wants them to do.
Yeah.
So whether it be, throw money at them so that they would go that way or whatever it is. But our Rotuman people need to be strong and be able to uphold their values and identity, and don't let the colonizers sway you. You know, because if they do sway you, then you will always have a division. So for our Rotuman people in Aotearoa to be united, we need to work together. We need to be able to advocate. And having said that, because of what's happening over the we've had Rotuman Language since 2018, 7 years now. And because of that, I've had to make a complaint to the Ombudsman. And we've got a court case that's coming up, and we are going to sue the government for 1.2 million for all the harm and the division that they've caused amongst our Rotuman people. All the so that's coming out soon, and we're going to do a press release on that. Whether they come to the party, we're not sure whether that's going to happen, but that's what we've done. We've sued 1.2 million for all the families and all the harm and all the trauma that they've caused our communities and our families. Our families are divided. For example, my family. Because of the Rotuman Language Week and the division that's happened, that the MPPs paid certain people of our community, my family is divided into, because there's some people in our family who are sycophants have decided to go, oh no, we'll go with that group because they got more money and we're going to get more resources from them. But that's not the case. They do nothing. They get the money and they do nothing. They only appear once a year. So that's a sad reality. Whereas for us, we don't need any funding. What we wanted from MPP was a recognition. Ministry of Pacific, we didn't want money. We were able to fundraise and run the Language Week. We just want a recognition that we are Rotuman, our culture is different, our identity is different, our language is different. Just have our language and be able to just recognize it and be able to say Nwa'ia and, just Nwa'ia and all those Rotuman words. But it was so difficult. So we had to get to that stage to do that. So unfortunately, I've had to, as of today, being Rotuma Day, I've had to make that complaint to the Ombudsman and have a court case and claiming 1.2 million against the Ministry of Pacific Peoples. So I thought I'd announce it tonight for Yexia.
Great. And I just want to kind of just take a pause and just honour what's just been shared in this moment, because the level of harm, this is also what colonisation does. The level of harm, and it's not just in the immediate here and now, it continues. But also something else is really quite important. The coloniser doesn't also need to be white. Colonisers and skin colour, there is no, because the colonised can also become colonisers. So that is actually really important. But I really do just want to take a pause in a minute, because I hear a number of things. The constant fight that you and your whānau, yourself, Nick, whānau have done in terms of bringing Rotuman Language Week and doing it through hell or high water, funded or not, because this is how important it is. And also the fact that, having to continually justify yourself, justify people having to justify themselves.
No, we shouldn't have to do that. We should be able to just be able to advocate and you know, like I said earlier, our culture, our identity, our language is totally different from the Fijian because we're governed by Fiji. Oh no, you're Fijian. I'm not Fijian, and I'm going to fight for what's mine. So yeah, unfortunately, that's the reality in Aotearoa, and it's still happening to our poor sister tangata whenua, which is really sad.
Yes. Definitely. So the fight that we're doing that's really similar to the Rotuman whānau is that we are still trying to fight for our own identity. We are still trying to implement our mana motuhake. We are still trying to gain our tino rangatiratanga, our self-discovery. We're still trying to gain these, and there's a lot of similarities between us tangata whenua and our Rotuman whānau in regards to decolonising and claiming back what was given to us. He taonga tuku iho, things that were passed down to us by our ancestors that we should be able to claim as our own, regardless who's around us. But unfortunately, with tauiwi and kupapa that have come, colonisers that have come within amongst our realm, and our world, have taken over and changed some of our mindset. And it was only because we did it so that it didn't hurt the rest of our whānau, the rest of our hapu, the rest of our iwi in future times. So the fight that Rachael and them doing now in 20 years' time, it's going to be bigger, it's going to be better, it's going to be easier for our children, for our mokopuna, to be able to walk the street and say, kia ora, he Māori aho, you know, I'm a Rotuman, and not be ashamed of who we are and grasping what is truly ours. And I'm thankful, and I'm blessed to have tupuna and ancestors that have allowed other Pacifica whānau, which are mine, because our whakapapa, our genealogy go back that way. We just didn't drop out of the air. Well, some of us Māori think we do. Pākehā think that we were made, we are DNA to apes and monkeys. Oh, well, I'm not. I'm not. But us people as Pacifica, we whakapapa from one place, and we all came through on that waka. Whichever waka it was, it sailed through our Polynesian whānau. So we are one. And yeah, passionate just like yous. I say, he whawhai tonu mātou, keep fighting the fight. Kush, mo ake. Kia ora.
While you're thinking, I just have a thought. So here's the thing, yeah? So, I've come from the UK. I am tau iwi on this whenua. I am a settler of colour. And so with that comes responsibilities also. So I heard in your whakaaro, Marama, in terms of tau iwi. We've got responsibilities here too. And so part of that is, okay, how do we stand in solidarity and support tangata whenua here, and also realising all our struggles are connected together, so it's not just a fight just over here, but it is an interconnected struggle, because colonisation works in the same way, different time periods, different groups of people, but the impacts are devastating, and they continue, and they are the same in many regards, and also there are some distinct differences.
Yeah, I think the kinship, those familial ties are ones that bind us all together. So the fight that you're having, around your language and identity isn't one that you should fight alone. It's one that we should fight all together. And when you look at some government documents around how do we support Māori, it's not, yes, we understand because this is your land, but actually, how do you support people of the Pacific? Because we are all people of the Pacific. And I know the question started off as, let's have a look at Christianity and religion. And, Christianity is a colonial construct. around who do we worship, who is our God. One thing that I cannot stand is, you look at Disney, who are making millions of dollars off the Moana film, right? So they're totally making a mockery of what to us, before Christianity came to the Pacific, those were our gods. Those were the people that we looked to. Those are the people that we prayed to. They were the kaitiaki. They were the guardians of the sea, the land, the sky. Those were our gods, right? Maui Kisikisi, Pulotu, all of those stories that people say, oh no, they're legends. They didn't happen. That wasn't true. Yet we and our people have allowed the colonial mindset, the colonizers, to come in at our expense, make millions of dollars that do not trickle back to our people, that line their pockets. Yet we all sit here and we love watching the movie, but how many of us actually sit back and go, what does this mean for our people? Like, we are allowing this, right? It's the colonial mindset that our people have now got, that are allowing this to happen. So we need to fight this fight together, and we need to empower all our people to think that we are, we all work as a collective. Let's look at a collective. Let's stop being divided and look at what is happening to us as, tangata moana. Which, here we're here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we're here as visitors, but we're not just visitors taking everything, we're visitors. We want to work together with tangata whenua, and, the constructs, the systems that are in place today just do not work for us or don't honour what we're doing. So I love that, you are looking at taking this further to advocate for your culture and your language, but I don't think it's a fight that you should take on just as a Rotuman community. I think we need to come together as whānau, as ainga, as family, to support the fight. So anyway, that's just my, and I think that's something that we need to think about when you look at, as I spoke about earlier, you only see Pacific as being in entertainment and in sports. And we have a report, and we're just about to launch the second report, where we have asked New Zealanders, what are your perceptions of the Pacific? And when we asked them to identify, a list of 10 people, and we show their faces, everyone was able to recognise Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, rugby players. But when we put, leaders from the Pacific, who are working at Pacific Island Forum states, or who are working at the UN, or who are women who are advocating for, farmers or whatever, no one knew who they were. And, why?
Because those stereotypes are helpful to a different story that wished to be told about the people. And yes, the question was about, the spirituality, but the interesting thing is that, and you've already alluded to this, is the stripping of the sacred that happens. So in terms of, the disrespect to the Pacific Atuas, and corporations making millions of them. And so if we just held that question there, just consider that question a little bit more in terms of how we might return to some of the spiritual practices before Christianity, just giving sign 10 minutes more of the okay. In terms of the stripping of the sacred, in terms of spirituality, I'm just wondering, as we kind of closing our conversation, what might be some of the steps in the diaspora, and I know we've already spoken to some of these things, that we might reclaim language, heritage, culture, and spiritual practice, and also how we might get together and perhaps advocate for more resources, because that's something very particular that I hear from Rach in terms of the absolute lack of resources that the Rotuman people have here in Aotearoa access to.
Thank you. Like I said, I've been colonized, so I need to decolonize myself. In doing that, I need to go back and have a look at what my forefathers, my ancestors had as gods, and see how that fits into my being, my well-being. And
your husband asked me today.
so, but like I say, I was brought up staunch Catholic, and that was the colonizers' religion, and I grew up with that right from when I was little and till now, and all my children are baptized Catholic. I didn't know any different, but I, as you know, as you get older, you learn more about yourself and your identity, and being out in Aotearoa and not having my parents around. I'm surrounded by this wonderful elderly people that give me advice, and and also I hold strong to my values and my identity again, and just the language is very important for me. So I'm always happy that we have Rotuman Language Week and we're able to celebrate it, because I can just speak in Rotuman, and sometimes I forget. Like this week, I start speaking to everyone in Rotuman, and then I realize, oh, they're not Rotuman. So yeah, I'm really excited about my language, and holding it true to myself, and also being able to share it with our people in Aotearoa, but also mainly having my kids speak the language, growing up and knowing their language and identity. And that's really important. That's something that I'm working on, and making sure that they know who they are, where they come from, and their language, and be strong and be able to advocate for something if they think that that's unjust, and go for it. Yeah, so well, now we're able to have Rotuma, I think, on the census form, but previously people tick Fiji, so you don't know who's Rotuman and who's not. So yeah, it's good to be able to, now we can do that. Now we've been acknowledged, like you said, yeah, and be able to tick Rotuma. But then again, it's a getting our people to fill out the census form is another issue. So we got to be able to somehow rally them all and get them to fill it out. And I think there's about 10,000 of us in Aotearoa. There's a lot of mixed. We're so mixed. We intermarry, and we're all over the motu. And there's about 10,000 of us, but I think the census says it's only 1,000. And again, that comes to our people not filling out the census form, not ticking the right columns, because if they Fijian Rotuman, they tick Fijian. They forget to tick Rotuman. Or if they Fijian Rotuman Indian European, they tick European, which is
Because filling out those census forms is also access to resources.
Exactly, yeah. And at the moment, I think having the language week and advocating for it and advocating for our language, it's coming out in our language as well. But again, just getting our people to do that. And resources is quite important for us to maintain the language. We're an endangered language in Aotearoa, well, all over the world. And Rotumans must strive to do that. I'd encourage all the Rotumans here to please ensure that your children, your grandchildren, everybody speaks it. And we want to have more resources. So that's something that we as a group, as a network of our like-minded, I'd like to call like-minded people, want to advocate and get that sorted. And I'm very blessed to have Auntie Cherie and Auntie Facilitator who've been advising, sometimes on our Rotuman, how the Rotuman word is spelled or how it's written. So that's really important for us. We don't want to, excuse the language, we don't want to bastardize the language. It has to be exactly how it was. How it's spoken, how it's written. It has to be correct. Yeah.
Would you like to chime in?
all I can say, maybe for the Rotuman community, the hapori themselves, is how we established our reo is we created our kohanga reo. We started with our babies, and our nannies came in and did it for nothing, because nannies were at home retired and bored, you know, doing 60 years working hard, and then all of a sudden retired, nothing to do, hands were really idle, had nothing to do. So we created the early childhood for our nannies and our papas to come in and, you know, keep themselves active, motivated, while teaching our young ones, our rangatahi, our pepis, the basic language and traditions of our customs. Well, that's just a suggestion. I mean, if we're saying that the Rotuman language is on dire straits, maybe it's just a suggestion that let's get a 5 of our whānau together, our pepis together, and sit here for a couple of hours for morning tea and lunch, and just embrace them around the reo of Rotuma. You know, the basic, how pass me this.
It can be done.
Yeah, it definitely can be done, and we did that with absolutely no resources. It wasn't until we were established in 1985 that the government actually realised that, hey, there's something coming out of this. We better put our fingers in it, because then it looks like we've done something as well. But, you know, under the Te Tiriti, you have that partnership with Tangata Whenua. There is that partnership that we're able to walk with yous along this, because that's what we're about. We're about aroha, we're about manaki, and we're here to help other Pasifika whānau to embrace what they need to embrace to hold up their own mana motuhake.
And just to add to all of that, where I think it's important, and I tell Toko everything you say, we need to educate our young, but also anyone, to develop skills around understanding that there's no just one way of doing things, that there's actually a number of different ways. So it's around critical thinking, right? Being able to listen, stand back, think about, okay, do I really agree with what that person's saying? Do I like that viewpoint? And then being able to stand up with a voice and question if whether or not that actually aligns with who you are as a person, aligns with your values, and actually not be afraid or embarrassed to ask, actually, is that really right? Is that how you're thinking? Because actually this is what I think, and this is what I'd like to add to the conversation. So I think to enhance those sorts of skills, we need to encourage Talanoa, we need to encourage conversation, whether it be at home, it be within our community groups. You know, we use our church groups. Let's use our collective, because we work as a collective, right? We always talk about being a part of a community. Let's use our community not only to belong and to strengthen our identity, but to encourage the Talanoa, so that our younger generation and future generation can question when things don't align with who they are as a person. And, you know, critical thinking, when you look at the future skills of what is required, given that we are in the 4th industrial revolution and AI is here and it is here to stay, what is missing is critical thinking. So don't let our kids think that, you know, AI is here to replace them and replace their jobs, because AI won't think critically. So if there's one thing I can leave here is please to encourage Talanoa and critical thinking, to enable, you know, this time next year you've got the younger generation sitting here on the panel talking the way we have been, but we just want to encourage that. So that's one thing that I'd like to be able to take away for all of you here.
And so that's it. So really, in closing, some beautiful kind of reflections and takeaways, and of course you will have your own. So in love of community is to be able to critique community and encourage and have space for critical conversation that is also loving. That's what I hear you saying, and really be proud in that identity. We've also got a model here in terms of tangata whenua and the kohanga reo journey, and what lessons that can offer in terms of supporting also the reclamation that is going on with Rotuman language, an endangered language at this moment in time. And also in terms of being able to strengthen in solidarity in terms of advocating together for a smaller community's need there, and also advocating in the sense in terms of our whānau amongst us who also identify as Rotuman, to perhaps tick Rotuman on the census form, even if we also have other identities, knowing perhaps those other identities will be taken care of in the resourcing. So it's a bit of a strategy, but also really asking those reflective questions of ourselves in terms of what are some of the things that we can ask ourselves in terms of our own personal decolonisation journey. So yeah, some wonderful nuggets of wisdom